Well, welcome everybody to the Faith Together podcast. I'm Lindsay, and we are so glad to have you here with us today. I'm joined with Leon. Hi, Leon.
Hello, Lindsay.
It's great to be together here on the Faith Together podcast. We have a great episode in store today, but before we get to that, we want to just share a reminder about a really fun giveaway that's happening.
Yes, this is exciting. I don't know that this is a typical thing for families to do, but I love the possibility and the opportunity that people have to do this.
Yes. So if you haven't heard, I'll give you a little sneak peek of what's happening. So on our website, centerff.com, you go on there, there's a survey right on the front page that you can fill out. Doesn't take long at all. And once you've filled out that survey, you are entered into a drawing for 2 adults and 2 kids to attend a family feast this coming summer at Locavore Farm here in Kankakee County.
Right. And we heard from Rachel a couple weeks ago about the unique ministry that they have out at their farm.
That's right. So Rachel Jones and her husband, Chris, own Locavore Farm. It's a farm that they use to harvest their own food, and they love bringing people from all over around the table to have great conversation together. They love the Lord, and they love to share who He is with others through their farm. And so I couldn't think of a better atmosphere for families to go and enjoy a night out at the farm with the animals. You get to tour, you get to have a lot of fun, and then you get a delicious multi-course meal.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe when she told us that their table is 100 feet long.
Yes, it is.
And it's just incredible. Having a feast with that many people would be pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've been out there, and it is an experience to remember. So we would love for you to enter that drawing, and we'll be picking a winner on April 1st. No fools about it.
That's right.
It's the real thing. So
real thing.
We will be doing that. And then we also wanted to let you know, Rachel was so generous to offer any of our listeners a discount code for any of their offerings at Locavore Farm. So that would include the Saturday or Thursday dinners that they have weekly, and then any summer camp registrations. So if you're interested in having your kids learning how to garden, how to grow food, and how to be a part of life on the farm, you can use our discount code to sign up for their summer camp. So our discount code for any of their events is CFF24, and that will get you 10% off.
And that's good for the month of March.
Yes, good for the month of March.
That's right.
So use it now, and you can go to locavorefarm.com to see all of the info. So thank you, Rachel, for just being a part of Faith Together and just coming alongside our listeners in this way. We're excited about it.
Yeah, and I thought I would give an update on what the Center for Faith and Family is doing these days. You know, we started quite a few months ago now. Boy, it's hard to believe we started this back in October.
It is hard to believe.
And at that point, we started talking about the grant that we received from Lilly Endowment and some of the things that we were intending to do. And we've really not talked a lot about that in recent days on the podcast. So I thought I'd just give you an update of what's happening these days. So we are in the process right now of creating a online curriculum that's free to anybody who wants to use it, that is designed to do in small groups, maybe at your church or in your home. It's a video-driven curriculum, so there's a teaching that's going to take place through the person that has written the curriculum, and then it's going to cover some really, really important topics, and then there'll be some support material that will go along with that. And that's all going to be free on our website. And what we're doing is we're actually in the process right now of building 4 series. We originally thought we would release it 1 series at a time, but we're afraid that small groups will get together, they'll get excited about this, start going through the curriculum, and then we won't have the next series ready by the time they get to the end of the series they're working on.
Yes.
So we're going to wait till we have these 4 series done. We're expecting that by the end of 2024, we will have this all ready to go. In fact, we've already recorded our first couple episodes. It's not a podcast, it's a curriculum. So our first couple lessons.
Our first couple lessons, yes.
And that's really, really exciting. So here are the topics we're going to cover the first year. Biblical foundations. So a recognition that we need to know what we believe if we're going to pass it on to our kids. So it's a walk through the Apostles' Creed, and Dr. Fresius, who did our series on the podcast, is also doing the curriculum for that. So it's going to be outstanding. And then we'll do a series in the curriculum on healthy parenting, what healthy parents look like. And then one that I have heard a lot of chatter about when I have shared it with other people that we're doing this, and that is how to deal with technology in the home when it comes to helping kids with screen time and all of those kind of things. And there's going to be a lot of really, really good information in that series. And then, of course, Lindsay, we did a podcast series on Advent, which we absolutely loved.
We did. That was so fun.
Yeah. And so we thought it's really important for us to write a curriculum that will help parents to kind of do some of those Advent things that we were talking about in the podcast.
Yeah. So the podcast is going to complement the curriculum, but it won't be exactly the same.
No,
right?
it'll be different, but they'll kind of go hand in hand together. And again, we're hoping that will be released by the end of 2024. So we'll give you updates as we move along on that process, but really excited about that and know that it's going to be a great resource
and
for families.
Let's just remind everyone, it's free.
It's free.
It's
That's
going
right.
to be free, which is so awesome.
You know, sometimes free means like cheesy.
Right.
Right? This is
not cheesy.
No, we have, for those of you who don't know, we have $1 million to spend on this. And so we're doing it right.
We are.
And so it's going to be pretty nice. It's going to be well done, and it's going to be very helpful, I think.
Yeah, and it's a great thing that you'll be able to share with other parents and help others out as they want to learn and grow and share with their kids. So
today we are talking about faith milestones.
Yes, we are.
Faith milestones. So significant moments in the faith journey that you don't want to forget. I talk to my students about driving stakes into the ground. Have you seen these stakes that you see like around people's properties with the little orange little flag on it that kind of identify the boundaries of the property?
Yep.
I don't know why that image sticks in my mind when I think about faith milestones, but like driving a stake in the ground, saying this in my spiritual walk, this is a significant moment that in the future when I'm struggling, I can look back to those stakes that have been driven in the ground, and I can hold on to those as significant encounters with God, significant moments that I have spiritually that I can hold on to in those moments of doubt.
Yeah, I love that image. And I also think about the, remembrance stones that God's people had in the book of Joshua, to remember all God did for them and laying those stones out. I can think of faith milestones as something like that, just writing down those times that God was so evident and real and a part of your life that you never want to forget.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder. We see those throughout Scripture, right?
We do.
Just things that are set up to be reminders.
And we are so passionate for these faith milestones, aren't we, Leon?
Yeah, we are.
As children's pastors, these are things that we could talk about for hours and hours, but it's not going to just be us talking today.
Speaking of children's pastors,
yes,
we have 2 local children's pastors with us that I'm really, really excited about because they are my friends.
Yes.
And so we have Cindy from Kankakee First and Amy from Mantino, both Church of the Nazarenes, and they're friends of ours.
Yes,
and
they
are. We're really excited to have them with us. So thank you, ladies, for being with us.
Sure. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for asking us.
Okay, the first one was Amy, the second one was Cindy. So if you can get their voices, that's good. I was thinking earlier, Lindsay, that it's kind of dangerous having 4 children's pastors in the same room.
I know, you never know what's going to happen.
Well, not only that, but I don't know that we can do this in the typical half-hour podcast that we usually do.
Yeah, you think we might go over a little bit?
I think so.
Okay.
If we do, I hope our listeners will stick around.
Yeah. Well, a fair warning. If we go way over, we could always divide up into 2 episodes.
If we needed to, we could.
Yeah, we've done that before.
Sure.
So we think it's worth the risk, though, because this conversation is so important, and we're just thrilled to have you with us, Cindy and Amy.
So before we get going on the topic, let's get to know our guests. So if each of you would just tell us where you serve And then maybe a funny moment or memory from your ministry. So Amy, we'll start with you.
Okay.
And I already said you serve at Mantino, right?
Yeah, I'm at Mantino, Church of the Nazarene.
And how long have you been there?
Been there for 8 years, full-time ministry.
8 years. Okay, awesome. And are there any funny stories? I mean, we all have them, right?
Yeah, I mean, every week there's a story. But, one comes to mind. Usually on Sundays, I pull the kids forward for a children's moment before they head to class on church. And so during this Sunday, I had an object lesson, and I invited a volunteer to come forward, and she sat up on the stage with me. And I had a lesson about sin and how sin separates us from God. Mm-hmm. And so I had a space heater and turned it on, and she sat in front of it, and she could feel the warmth of the heat. And I said, this is like you being in the presence of God and feeling the presence of God and his love just pouring on you. But sin can get in the way of that. Like, we can allow sin to separate us from God. So I put a big whiteboard in front with the letters SIN on it, sin. And so that just got that concept across. Well, 3 weeks later, a mom comes to me and she says that her daughter was sitting in front of a space heater in the living room. And she's this little kindergartner girl, super soft-spoken, really sweet, just enjoying the warmth of the heat in the middle of winter. And her older brother, 6th grade boy, saw her enjoying this and thought, I'm going to go annoy my little sister.
Oh, no.
And so he goes and stands in front of the heater, and right away, without thinking, she just blurts out really strongly, "Stop being the sin." And I just love that. It was, we just cracked up when she was telling me, because it just, our kids hear everything we say and will remember it. It took no time for her to just shoot that out. And I just thought that was a funny story.
That's great. That's great. All right. And then Cindy.
Yeah.
You've been in ministry a long time.
Long time. Yep.
How long have you been doing it?
I've been in ministry 38 years.
38 years.
Yep.
Wow.
And 32 at the same church?
32 at Kankakee First Church of the Nazarene.
Yeah. Wow.
Amazing.
Those kids are blessed.
It's a lot
Yes,
of kid
they are.
stories.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. So
We
can you
could just
find
let
one?
you take the rest of the episode with your stories.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think one of my favorite things is on Sunday afternoon when a parent gets a hold of you and says, "What did you teach today?" Because what they hear and how they take it home doesn't always appear to be quite like what we thought we said. And it was a Easter Sunday, and I was having lunch with a family, and a preschooler was sitting across the table from me at lunchtime, and I knew they had been at our church that Sunday morning. So I said to the preschooler, "So what was your story today?" And she started to say, "Well, Jesus was praying in the garden, and these bad men came with torches and golf clubs." And they took Jesus and put him in timeout, and he had not done anything.
Oh.
And then she paused and said, "Just like when I get put in timeout and I don't do anything." And then she continued to tell the story in her way that the bad men, they took Jesus and they killed him, but he showed them because he didn't stay dead. He came back to life and kept walking around. But the theology of a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, I mean, that will preach. And exactly what you just said, it sticks, things go to them. I love the story that 3 weeks later, she still remembered that concept. And so, every opportunity we have makes a difference every single time.
That's right. And while children's ministry is hilarious, we can sit here and have so many laughs about so many stories you shared and more to come. It is also a very holy work, isn't it? It's a holy work that the Lord does that we get a front row seat to see him at work in their lives. And I think one of the most amazing things about children's ministry and ministry with families is that we as the church have the opportunity to walk with a family for their entire lives from start to finish. What other organization, what other place has that kind of opportunity? A school has a couple of years, whether it's a elementary school or a middle school or a high school. But as the church, we get to walk with them all through life. And as we walk with families on this faith journey, we know that there are some important stops along the way. Every family has their own journey, right? Every family has their own ups and downs, and every family looks different. No family is the same, but there are some unifying experiences that families we get to walk with on the journey of faith in the church go through. And so today we want to talk about some of those stops on the journey, some of those faith milestones together.
Yeah, and maybe we should start that conversation with a recognition. I know we all agree with this, and that is that what we do as children's pastors in the church is a support supplement to what the parents are doing. So what we're sharing today are not things that we do. We are there to help support and to encourage and to equip parents who are the primary spiritual caregivers to their children. And sometimes we get that a little bit backwards. We're used to hiring adults in our kids' lives to do certain things like teachers and coaches and piano teachers and things like that. And sometimes we get confused and we think we should do that with faith as well. And the truth is, parents are the ones that do that, and we support that and encourage it and help supplement it. With that said,
that ties in directly with this series we're in, the Living Out the Shema.
Right.
Knowing that there are practices that we do at home and there are practices we do away from home as parents, as caregivers to the children in our lives. So faith milestones is one of those things that we do away from home with
a lot of
the local church.
Yeah, a lot of these, we're going to, as we go through them, we're going to see these are things that happen outside the home. And going back to the Deuteronomy 6 text that we've been looking at, living out your faith at home when you're away from home, that's kind of what's driving this series.
Yeah, absolutely. So faith milestones,
All
where
right,
to begin?
Let's jump into these. So we're not implying this is an exclusive list. This is just a few things that we thought we would talk about today that are important to us, that we think should be important to families and to their children. And so we're just going to walk through these and see how this goes.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with child or baby dedications. I know in some traditions, baby baptisms, but they all kind of lean in the same direction, serving a similar kind of purpose. So who wants to jump in on child and baby dedications?
I'll do that.
Okay, Amy.
So child dedication is an opportunity for parents to declare that they want their child to be raised to know Jesus. And so a lot of times that happens on a Sunday morning. It's an official opportunity for them to come before the church with the pastor, have their family, have a godparent or a friend stand up in front of the church, and an opportunity to say, yes, I want my child to know God and to be raised in an environment where the church can come alongside, the family can come alongside and invest in their child to follow Jesus. So there, at that time, the pastor can ask questions of them, and then they say, yes, that's what I would like. And then they turn to the church, and the church also says, yes, we will be a part of this child's life and help them to know Jesus.
That's one of the things I love about baby dedications, at least the way we do it in the Church of the Nazarene. I don't know how other traditions may do that, but the idea of that as parents, I'm dedicating myself to raise this child a particular way, and then the church comes right along and they have a role in that as well, and declare that as we have opportunity, we will be a part of that journey.
Yeah, it's a really great opportunity to say, I am the primary spiritual caregiver as a parent, like you had mentioned, Leon. And then for you to see that and to remember that, and then also for an opportunity for our kids to look back on it. So we like to, in our church, take pictures of it. We also have a certificate that they can take home, and I encourage parents to put that in the baby book for them, or if they have a digital one, they create a book, you can take a picture of it and put it in. And my own child, she's 9 now, we've opened the baby book, once a year or so, and she, for some reason, is really drawn to that page where she can see her picture. I mean, it helps that grandpa was the pastor at the time and was holding her. But she's just like, so why did we do this again, Mom? And it was a really good, as you said, just a milestone, a marker in time where she can see, my parents value this. Look at all the people. I'm not alone in this journey. So
That's beautiful. And one thing I really love about child or baby dedications is how it includes people that maybe typically wouldn't come to your church that day because the family has invited extended family to be there, or cousins, or, close friends or neighbors that are in their circle. And it's just such a beautiful way to include them in the church for that day. And maybe they wouldn't have had an opportunity to come to your church or been willing to, but because it's a special day for the family and for that child, they're there, and God can use that as well. So I love that.
Yeah, that's good.
So our next one we have here, Faith Milestone, is baptism. And Cindy, would you just share with us a little bit about your experiences with baptism and kids and families and how you've seen God work in that space?
Absolutely. Well, so when we talk about a child's baptism or a teen's baptism, we are talking about an event that takes place in their life that they choose to do after they have received Christ into their life. And so there's that time of baby dedication. And I often say when I'm part of a dedication that we celebrate this today, and these parents will get a certificate. But someday we will pull that certificate out and just show a child when they receive Jesus that this is what mom and dad did to get you to this point.
Oh.
And so it's just kind of a tie into. So eventually that child is going to want to be baptized. And I often say this needs to be the child's decision, not the parent's decision, because they know when they have a faith story and are ready to share that through baptism. And for me, baptism is very significant, but the most important part of baptism for me is that it helps a child articulate their own faith story with God. If this be in a class, at your church or at home, helping the child write out their story, or let them dictate to you and you write out their story. And so this is something that I've done for years and years. And I have a few questions that I always ask the child in that class. First thing is, tell me when and where you asked Jesus to come into your life, and who did you pray with? And getting them to articulate that moment of their story. Another question I ask them before their baptism is, what's the best thing about being a follower of Jesus? Another question would be, who is a role model in your life that shows you how to be a follower of Jesus? And then the last question is, what would you tell someone who is not yet a follower of Jesus? And what this does is the child writes this out, or someone writes it out for them, and they are able to articulate it and to say it. It gives them their faith story to share. So I really look at baptism as kind of an empowering for them to take that next step in being able to verbalize and share what their faith in Christ really means. Earlier, you said something about driving a stake into the ground or a remembrance stone, and I really think that moment of baptism can be that. So I have a lot of these stories over the years from children and teens, and I've used those stories in many different ways. Sometimes I've taken that faith story and given it back to a young person before they go to college. Or there have been situations where a child has passed away, and I've been able to give that faith story back to those parents during that time to bring them some comfort of that child's own words of what Christ meant to them. Young adults going through a difficult time, sitting down with them and pulling out that faith story and reminding them that this really is your story and that God has been in it, and that and the things that you said then are still true of who you are now. And so our church makes a really big deal about baptism. It's a huge celebration, and I love that. I try really hard to make it really a special occasion, and I hope that parents would see the significance of it and allow their kids to really be celebrated for their walk with Christ.
Yeah, that was, wow, well said. One of the things that I like about what you said, Cindy, was that this approach to baptism and having them tell their story, it validates that their experience is real. I think oftentimes adults in the church think, oh, isn't that cute? Isn't that sweet that child went up to pray, or whatever the situation may be? But I think one of the things that I know all of us agree on is that these experiences that children have are authentic, and they may look different than ours as adults because they're at a different point in their life journey. I think one of the greatest things that we can do as adults is affirm their story, no matter how strange it may sound to us, that it's real. And I like the writing it down and being able to bring it up later as a reminder that you don't have to be afraid that what you experienced as a child wasn't real. Occasionally, I will have people come to me, maybe college students even, who say, I think I want to be baptized again. And I ask them, why do you want to be baptized again? Well, I don't really I don't know if I understood God when I was 6 years old the same way I understand God now and understand my relationship with him. And I say to them, well, of course you don't. You're 20 years old and you were 6.
Right,
you better not think of God the same way, and your relationship with God should have grown over that time. It doesn't mean you have to be rebaptized. It just means you need to drive another stake down in the ground and say, I'm recommitting now to what God has done in my life.
That's good.
And claim the baptism of your 6-year-old self in your life now. And I think we give opportunities for that, driving down a stake.
I love that. I love all of these sharings that we've had. And I would say, in speaking of stories and sharing our story, we've talked about this in this series, Leon, the storytelling episode a few weeks back at the beginning of this series. We talked about the story of God and kids knowing the story of God and how they are a part of that story. And it's not a story that's over. It's to be continued, and we continue in that. And so a faith milestone that I like to think about, and it's not something that is maybe present in every church or every faith tradition, but is one of a first Bible, a time where a child would be given their very first Bible that they can read and they can understand and discuss with their parents at home. And many times in this faith milestone, I've had a chance to have either kindergarten, first, second grade, kind of those earlier elementary ages where you meet with the families prior to presenting these Bibles to the children, and you ask their parents to write them a letter inside their first Bible of not only their love for them, but what they hope for in their story and in their faith and what they're praying for them for, and tying in some of those things, like at the baby dedication or the child dedication, what was some of the verses, that maybe they focused on for their child's life. They could write that or highlight that verse in that Bible for them. Or, if they have been baptized at that point, usually most aren't, but if they have been, including that special date in their first Bible and just those special occasions included in it. And then at the actual time of presentation, usually I've presented these Bibles on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night. Families are all there. And it's not me as the pastor giving the Bible to the children, but their parents are handing it to them to, again, show that partnership that we have together, that we're going to be committed as a family to knowing the Word of God, knowing the story of God, getting His Scripture, His truth into our hearts for all of your life. We're committed to that. And, of course, giving those practical tools like a reading plan and different activities that they could do with it. But I think just focusing on our own faith stories and the story that God has already written and continues to write is a really powerful experience for kids and families.
Yeah, that's good. First Bibles, you guys do Amy, do you do anything with that?
I actually give a Bible when I dedicate a child.
Okay.
And the reason I do that, and I write in it too as well, and it comes from me, and they can look back at it and see, okay, this was my first pastor. But I never want them to get, like if they leave the church, I never want them to get to elementary age where they're coming into the church even, and us go through it and have a conversation and then them say, I don't have a Bible. So I never want to make it to that point. So I always give them a Bible, a real Bible, not a children's Bible, like a real Bible for them to have in their house.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
All right, our next milestone is salvation. I'm looking across the room here, and I'm seeing Lindsay smiling because she knows how I feel about this topic. So salvation, of course, that's our ultimate goal. We're wanting kids to get to a point in their lives where they're following Jesus. But I think sometimes as adults, we expect our kids to have a similar salvation experience as we had, especially if we were adults when we became a Christian. So the typical altar call is pretty traditional in the Church of Nazarene, other traditions as well, and then a particular prayer, a salvation prayer. I want to propose to you that for those kids that are raised in the church, this might look very different. First of all, let me say this. I think one of the greatest privileges of a parent is to be able to pray with their child to accept Jesus as their Savior. It's one of the reasons why in the children's worship service that I lead, we don't give very many opportunities for children to do that in children's worship. I would rather set the table, do some of the groundwork to get them ready. And then hopefully that's something that happens at bedtime, at home, or in the car where a child says, hey, I want to pray, out of the blue because the timing was right for them, and just let it happen organically. We are people who believe in God's prevenient grace. We are not worried about something happening to our child and them dying and not going to heaven because they didn't pray a particular prayer. So how do I get there theologically? Well, there is a guy that I just really helped me with this. His name's Gordon Smith, and Gordon Smith wrote a book called Beginning Well. And in that book, he has a chapter entitled Second Generation Christians. Now, I had always heard people say there is no such thing as a second generation Christian. Everybody's got to make that decision for themselves. And I totally agree with that. However, for these, what he identifies as second generation Christians, these are kids who grow up in a Christian home, grow up in the church, are raised up by wonderful Christian parents in a church that really helps support them. And for them, falling in love with Jesus happened at a very early age. And at some point along the way, they probably have prayed a prayer. In fact, they've probably done it multiple times, and because they love Jesus. And I just remember thinking about this back many years ago when I was a full-time children's pastor. I remember thinking about this and thinking, when an 8-year-old child prays a salvation prayer and we say, oh, they've become a Christian, I began wondering, well, what was all the stuff before that? They grew up in the church, they prayed prayers, Jesus was a part of their play, they knew nothing other than Jesus being a part of their life. And because of that, when the time came that they understood what sin was and that they needed forgiveness of sin and that Jesus died so their sins could be forgiven, that the natural movement for them was to pray that prayer that some adults said they should pray. And so they do. And so I've stopped asking the question for our church kids raised in the church and in Christian families. I've stopped asking the question, when did they become a Christian? And started asking the question, when did they first fall in love with Jesus? And for many parents, they might say around 2 or 3 or 4, because that's how it happened in our family. And they may have, Cindy, you mentioned being able to say that date. For some of these kids, they may have a hard time with that. Parents may say, well, this is the first time really we talked about it together, and this is what we've kind of recorded, but we're really not sure that's the first time, but we're kind of setting that as the first time. And that we focus more on letting our kids fall in love with Jesus and taking the next steps in that journey. And part of that next step is a salvation prayer. Part of that next step is a further commitment. Part of the next step is sanctification, if you want to use that language. Part of the next step is another commitment along the way. And so I think as parents, we can calm down a little bit about making sure our kids pray that prayer and just letting it happen when the time is right. And when that happens, it's going to be authentic. So I'm curious, because I've not run this by any of you, what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I agree with that. And I'm careful when I talk with the kids about baptism. I have that question there, but I also say, you know what, if you've grown up in the church, you've probably known Jesus all along and you've prayed and you have that relationship. So instead of sharing that, maybe you want to share an example of when you've spent time with God and how it's been really meaningful for you, or share a favorite Bible verse. For me, and the reason I know that is for me, I don't remember back to a time where I prayed the prayer and chose to follow Jesus. I'm sure I did during Sunday school growing up, but because I didn't have a specific time, just like you said, Leon, I understand our kids might not either.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I mean, I do have children all the time that have that same scenario, and we talk it through just like you said.
Yeah, I think that the question of when did they start falling in love with Jesus is a powerful one. It's a convicting one for me as well when you think about that for your own self, and we can just get caught up and focused on the wrong things. And isn't that what the enemy wants us to do? He wants us to be distracted and look at the wrong things. And this conversation just reminds me specifically that, you know, Jesus is the most important part of that conversation when it comes to salvation and our relationship with him.
Yeah. So let me just make sure I'm clear. I am not saying that a salvation moment is unimportant. I'm just saying that what it looks like for kids may look different, especially kids who are raised in the church and in Christian families. It might look different for them. And the traditional adult who comes down to an altar has a lot of things to confess and receives Christ as Savior is a very different experience than kids who are raised in a Christian family, in a church that loves them, and it's just natural for them to love Jesus. They will have to commit at some point in their lives that they're going to follow Jesus, but I think it starts when they're young.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we have one more faith milestone to talk about together, and that one is communion. So, Cindy and Leon, I know that you guys offer communion in your children's worship hour. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like for your kids in your space?
Well, I think more than anything, what I like to approach with younger kids is that it's a teaching tool. So it's the repetition of teaching them. Many times I will pull the youngest kids out and set them at a table while Leon leads the older kids in receiving communion. And I use it more as teaching than I maybe the traditional way of what we think of as communion.
Yeah, and there's different thoughts on this, right? So one of the things that we do is we try to let parents know in advance the Sundays that we're going to offer the kids communion. So if they choose to have their kids with them in the adult service to take communion as a family, then they have the option to do that. Or if they don't feel like their child is ready to take communion and they want to kind of protect that, they can keep their children with them. But when we offer it to our elementary age kids, we're very, very clear of what it means. One of the great joys I have is leading communion with our kids and helping them to not only recognize what the symbols mean, but the significance of what Jesus did that those symbols represent. And one of the things that we do is we talk about the environment in which we're receiving communion. So I remember one of the first times I did this with the group of kids that we've got now, I began asking them a bunch of questions. So after we went through and talked about what each of the elements represent, I asked them things like, why when we take communion is it usually really quiet? And then they would respond, well, that's because it's like a special thing. We want to honor Jesus and those kinds of answers. And then I would ask them, well, if this is a special time, then what does that mean about playing while we're doing it? Or playing around with the cup or messing around with our friend next to us. So I had one child say, Pastor Leon, what if we put our